My family posted photos from their Hawaii trip. While ignoring the first time in 15 years, I asked for help, $500 to fix my car so I could get to work. When I confronted them at dinner, my brother snorted and said, "You can't expect people to just drop everything because your engine finally died." I stayed silent. That was 10 months ago. Last week, my mom sat in a mediator's office crying that she'd used me as a replacement husband since dad died. Everyone in my family knew that David was our emergency contact, not 911, not AAA. You called David first. When my older sister's car died on the highway with her kids screaming in the back seat, David transferred $3,000 before the tow truck even showed up. He once drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to bring my mom cash when her furnace broke in January. Didn't even take his coat off, just handed her an envelope with $8,000 and drove back home to make it to work the next morning. I always felt bad about it, but whenever I brought it up to my parents, they told me that David's always been bad with boundaries. That's not our problem to fix. So while the rest of us posted photos of our sushi dinners and weekend brunches, he ate peanut butter sandwiches every day for lunch. When my brother Liam got that DUI, David was at the courthouse at 3 a.m. with bail money and a lawyer he couldn't afford. Liam never even said thank you, but this time was different. David's car finally died on I-95 during Monday rush hour. The transmission gave out completely. The mechanic said it was a miracle it lasted this long. $2,000 minimum to fix it, probably more. David sat in that grimy waiting room doing math on his phone. Rent was due Friday. He had $127 in his account. For the first time in 15 years, he opened our family group chat and typed, "Hey everyone, my car broke down. I hate to ask, but could anyone help with $500? I'll pay you back Friday when I get paid. Sorry again." Within seconds, the responses poured in. Sister Sarah with heart emojis, Liam with the muscle emoji saying, "Got you, bro." Mom saying she'd Venmo him right away. Cousin Melissa promising to send something immediately. I actually believed them. He thanked everyone 3 times, said he'd never forget this. David took 40 Ubers to work each way, watching his phone constantly. No Venmo notifications. By Thursday night, he was down to his last $20. He texted again, trying to keep it light. "Hey, just checking if anyone sent anything. Need to pay the mechanic in the morning." Sarah responded first. "Oh my bad. Derek's travel baseball tournament is this weekend and I'm swamped. Maybe next week?" Liam, "Shit bro, my account's overdrawn. You know how it is." Mom, "Honey, my social security doesn't come until the 3rd. Can't the mechanic wait?" Melissa left him on red. That weekend, my entire family put photos on their Instagram of our weekend trip to Hawaii that they didn't even invite him to. I tried to suggest it, but they basically just told me to shut the fuck up, LOL. Well, Saturday was our monthly family dinner at Mom's house. David showed up like always, even though he'd had to borrow Uber money from a coworker. Everyone was there. Sarah complaining about her kitchen remodel taking too long. Liam showing off his new Apple Watch. Mom serving pot roast on the china David had bought her last Christmas. Melissa was FaceTiming from Miami, propping her phone against the centerpiece so she could still be part of family dinner. David sat in his usual spot, the wobbly chair nobody else wanted. They passed around the mashed potatoes, argued about the game, kids running through with sticky hands. Nobody mentioned his texts. Nobody asked about his car. It was like the last week hadn't even happened. Finally, during a lull in conversation, David set down his fork. "So is anyone going to acknowledge what happened this week?" My entire family dismissed him. Sarah didn't even look up from her phone. "What happened this week?" I asked for help for the first time ever, and everyone left me stranded. Liam snorted, reaching for more bread. "Dude, we all have bills. You can't expect people to just drop everything because your engine finally died." "My engine," David said slowly, "died because I never had money to fix it properly, because I gave it all to you." I pretended not to care about what was going on, but on the inside I was rooting for him. Mom sighed that particular sigh she did when she thought someone was being dramatic. "David, sweetheart, nobody forced you to help anyone. If you couldn't afford it, you should have said no." "When?" David's voice cracked. "When Sarah's kids needed a place to live? When Liam got arrested? When you were going to lose the house?" "Oh my gosh." Sarah finally looked up. "Are you seriously keeping score? That's so toxic, David. Family doesn't keep score." "But family shows up," David said. "Family sends the $50 they promised when someone's walking to work in the rain. Maybe if you'd learned to manage money instead of playing ATM machine." Liam started. That's when David laughed. Not a happy laugh, the kind that made everyone stop chewing. "Playing ATM? I haven't been on a date in 3 years. I eat peanut butter sandwiches for dinner. I've worn the same shoes since 2019. While you were in Miami last week, Melissa, I was walking 4 miles to work because I couldn't afford the bus." "David's having another pity party," Sarah announced to the table. "This is exactly why we had to remove you from the group chat. The negativity." David stood up slowly, looked around the table at each of them, his family, the people he'd destroyed his credit for, emptied his retirement for, given up his entire 30s for, and walked out. We didn't know it at the time, but he was sick of getting taken for granted, and he was ready to make my entire family pay, including me. Full story on Channel Inc. below. The next morning, I was scrolling through my phone when I saw David's LinkedIn notification pop up. His status changed from his usual boring job title to "Open to work, seeking opportunities in Seattle Pacific Northwest." My coffee mug stopped halfway to my mouth. Seattle was 3,000 miles away from Hartford. I clicked on his profile and saw he'd already applied to 12 jobs out there since last night. My hands started shaking a little because David never did anything impulsive, never made moves without planning everything out first. This wasn't some emotional reaction that would blow over in a few days. I texted him asking if he was okay, but he left me on red. 20 minutes later, Sarah called me screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. David had declined her Venmo request for $500 with a note that said, "No longer available for financial assistance." She'd already promised the PTA she'd cover the field trip costs for her son's class next week. She kept saying he was being petty and vindictive, and how could he do this to the kids? I tried to calm her down, but she hung up on me when I suggested maybe she could pay for it herself. 3 days passed with the family group chat exploding every few hours with new complaints about David. Then Mom called me crying harder than I'd heard since Dad died. She'd gone to use her credit card at the grocery store and it got declined. When she called the bank, they told her David had removed himself as an authorized user and canceled the card he'd been paying for the past 5 years. All her automatic payments started bouncing. The electric company, her Medicare supplement, even her Netflix. She had to borrow money from her neighbor just to buy groceries. The bank said she didn't qualify for a new card on her social security income alone. That same afternoon, Liam sent a screenshot to the group chat of David's text refusing to co-sign his apartment lease renewal. Without David's credit score, the landlord wanted 3 months security deposit up front or Liam would face eviction in 30 days. Liam called David every name in the book, said he was destroying the family out of spite. I sat in my apartment that night scrolling through years of family photos on my phone. David was in almost every single one, but always in the background, always holding someone's bag or jacket, always the one taking the picture instead of being in it. At birthday parties, he was cutting the cake while everyone else smiled for the camera. At Christmas, he was assembling toys while we opened presents. At Mom's retirement party, he was in the kitchen washing dishes while we toasted her. His smile looked more forced in each photo as the years went on. A week after the dinner, David posted a single photo on Facebook of his empty apartment with cardboard boxes stacked by the door. The caption just said, "New beginnings." Within minutes, the family group chat went crazy with everyone saying he was having a mental breakdown. Sarah said we should call the police for a wellness check. Mom said he needed psychiatric help. Liam said he was probably on drugs. Nobody asked if he was okay or what his plans were. Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands and drove to David's apartment with all 3 of her kids. She texted the group that she was going to talk some sense into him. She knocked on his door for 10 minutes straight while her kids cried in the hallway. His car was in the parking lot, so she knew he was home. She left the kids sitting on his doorstep crying for 20 minutes, loudly telling them that Uncle David didn't love them anymore. The neighbors started coming out to see what was happening. David never opened the door. Mom escalated things even further by calling David's employer the next morning. She told HR that David was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous, that he was having a psychiatric crisis and needed immediate intervention. They put him on administrative leave pending a psychological evaluation. She actually seemed proud of herself when she told us, said it was for his own good. 2 weeks after that dinner, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop downtown. Marcus worked with David and looked exhausted. He told me David had passed his psych evaluation, but the damage was done. Everyone at work knew about the call, knew his family thought he was was crazy. David had been sleeping in the break room because he'd given up his apartment to save money for the move. Marcus said David hadn't eaten a real meal in days, just crackers from the vending machine. I'm really curious about how David managed to keep helping his family for 15 years straight without ever asking for anything back until now. The way he calculated everything down to his last $127 shows he must have been tracking his finances super carefully that night, I couldn't stop myself from searching David's name online. I found his GoFundMe for the car repair from 3 weeks ago. It had 3 donations totaling $45, all from strangers. The same day he'd posted it, Sarah had posted photos of her new kitchen backsplash that cost $4,000. Mom had posted about booking her cruise for spring. Liam had posted a video of himself buying rounds of shots for strangers at a bar. Our family's Hawaii vacation photos were still all over Instagram, everyone smiling on the beach while David was walking to work. The rumor started 2 days later when Melissa called everyone she knew to explain that David must have a gambling problem, because why else would someone with a good job be so broke all the time? She posted in the extended family Facebook group that we should pray for David's addiction, and within hours my aunts and uncles were texting each other about whether they'd seen warning signs. Cousin Jake said he'd always thought David seemed sketchy, and Aunt Linda remembered that one time David couldn't make it to her birthday party, which was obviously because he was at a casino. The whole thing spread so fast that by Wednesday afternoon, Mom was getting calls from church friends asking if David needed an intervention. That's when I was going through Mom's filing cabinet looking for my birth certificate for a passport application and found a folder labeled David Rent with 5 years of deposit slips showing $500 every single month going into her personal account, not the household one. The dates went back to when David moved out after college, and there were notes on each slip in Mom's handwriting saying things like cruise fund and kitchen remodel and new wardrobe. I took photos of every single page with my phone, my hands shaking as I added up $30,000 he'd paid for a room he hadn't slept in since 2018. 3 days later, Derek cornered David in the Whole Foods parking lot while David was loading groceries into a coworker's car since his was still broken. Derek started yelling about how David was destroying the family by being selfish, how Sarah was crying every night because her own brother abandoned them. David pulled out his phone and started reading from a list he'd apparently been keeping for years. Every payment, every bailout, every time he'd covered their mortgage while Derek was buying his third boat. Derek tried to grab the phone, but David just kept reading louder. Customers stopping to stare as he listed the $7,000 for their daughter's braces, the $4,000 for their son's summer camp, the $12,000 when Derek got laid off and didn't tell Sarah for 3 months. Security came over and Derek drove off, but not before screaming that David was dead to them. About 3 weeks after that family dinner, David's Facebook disappeared, then his Instagram, then his LinkedIn. His phone number went straight to a message saying the number was no longer in service. The only way to reach him was through his work email, and he only responded to actual work-related messages. Mom tried calling his office, but the receptionist said he'd requested not to receive personal calls. That same week, Liam somehow got the address of David's storage unit from the guy who'd helped David move years ago. He showed up with bolt cutters at 2 in the morning, cut the lock, and started tearing through boxes looking for hidden cash or valuable stuff David must be hoarding. Instead, he found 15 years of receipts, every money order, every Western Union transfer, every bail bond, every cashier's check, all organized by year in banker's boxes with our names on them. The receipts for Sarah alone filled 3 boxes. Liam took photos of some of them before the storage facility's security showed up and called the cops. When tax season came around, Mom did what she always did, but this time added David as a dependent, claiming she'd provided more than half his support by giving him free housing. The IRS computer system flagged it immediately since David's W-2 showed $65,000 in income and his address didn't match Mom's. She got a letter asking for proof of support, and when she couldn't provide any because David hadn't actually lived there or taken any money from her, they started asking more questions about her previous returns. One night I couldn't sleep and decided to drive around, and I passed that old diner on Route 9 where David used to take me for milkshakes when I was little. His beat-up Honda was in the parking lot, which seemed impossible since it was supposed to be at the mechanic still. I parked and looked through the window and saw him in a back booth with a laptop, spreadsheets covering the table, a cup of coffee, and nothing else. The cook came over and they talked for a minute, and I realized David was wearing a uniform shirt I didn't recognize, some logistics company logo I'd never seen before. He'd been working a second job this whole time, probably overnight shifts, and never told anyone. Then Sarah did something that even I couldn't believe. She actually found a lawyer willing to file a lawsuit for emergency family support, claiming David had created a pattern of financial dependence and couldn't just stop without causing severe hardship. The lawyer argued that 15 years of continuous support established a legal obligation, like some kind of family alimony. They filed it in small claims court, asking for $20,000 in immediate relief and ongoing monthly support of $2,000. Mom and Liam signed affidavits supporting Sarah's claim, saying David had voluntarily assumed financial responsibility for the family. When I refused to sign one or contribute to Sarah's legal fund, they started a WhatsApp group called Family Only, and specifically didn't add me. Melissa sent me screenshots where they called me David's spy, said I was probably getting money from him secretly, that I'd chosen him over real family. Mom posted that she was disappointed in me for not supporting my sister in her time of need. About a month after that dinner, the court date arrived, and David showed up with 3 boxes of documents and no lawyer. When Sarah's attorney started presenting their case about established dependence, David asked to submit evidence and handed the judge 15 years of bank statements showing $247,000 transferred to family members with 0 repayment, not even a single thank you card in most cases. He had printed out every text message where family members had asked for money, every email, every voicemail transcript. Sarah's lawyer asked for a recess and never came back after lunch. The judge ruled in David's favor that afternoon and ordered Sarah to pay him back $12,000 within 90 days. That night, Melissa's husband called David from his car in a parking lot and said he felt awful about everything and wanted to wire him $5,000 right away. David thanked him, but before the money could transfer, Melissa grabbed the phone and screamed that if her husband sent even $1, she'd divorce him and take everything. The line went dead and the money never came. 3 days later, Mom called me crying because the power company had shut off her electricity and she was sitting in the dark with candles. She begged me to pay the bill but refused to admit that David had been covering it for the past 3 years, along with her cable and internet. I paid it myself, and when I checked the account history, there were 36 payments from David's checking account going back to when Dad died. 6 weeks after that family dinner, Liam got arrested again, but this time for shoplifting power tools from Home Depot to sell for drug money. He called David from county jail at 2 in the morning like he always did, expecting immediate bail money. David's phone rang and rang while Liam left voicemail after voicemail begging for help and promising to pay him back this time for real. David never answered, and Liam sat in jail for 5 days before a public defender got him released on his own recognizance. I couldn't take it anymore and drove to the storage facility where David had been living since giving up his apartment. He'd set up a cot between boxes and had a camping stove plugged into an outlet he was stealing power from. He showed me his laptop with a job offer from a tech company in Seattle starting in 3 weeks and his savings account with enough for the move. He said he'd been planning this for months and nobody in the family would get his new address or phone number. 2 weeks later, Mom organized what she called an intervention for David's mental health crisis and invited everyone, including extended family and neighbors, and even called David's boss at work. She set up chairs in a circle in her living room with a banner that said, "We care about you, David," and prepared speeches about his concerning behavior. David never showed up because nobody had actually told him about it, and Mom just assumed he'd somehow know to come. They all sat there for 2 hours eating the sandwiches Mom made while talking about how David had always been difficult and antisocial. About 2 months after that dinner, Sarah was going through old emails looking for something for her lawyer when she found a folder on their shared computer labeled Family Recordings. Inside were hundreds of audio files dating back 15 years of every single time a family member asked David for money, including the exact amounts and the promises to pay back and the insults when he asked for repayment. There were screenshots of text messages and bank statements and even recordings of Mom calling him selfish for asking when she'd pay back the $10,000 he'd given her for Dad's funeral. Sarah deleted everything, but David had already uploaded copies to 3 different cloud services. boxes. What made David start keeping such detailed records 15 years ago? The way he organized everything by family member in those banker's boxes shows he was planning something even back then. I found Mom the next week crying over photo albums in her kitchen, but when I sat down to comfort her, she wasn't sad about David at all. She was worried because her knee surgery was coming up, and she didn't know who would pay the $5,000 deductible now that David wasn't answering anyone's calls. She actually said, maybe we could start a family fund where everyone chips in, which was funny since nobody had chipped in for David ever. That same week, Derek came home early from work and found Sarah's credit card statements showing she'd been taking money from their kids' college funds while simultaneously accepting David's money for the same expenses. He packed his stuff that night and filed for divorce and full custody the next morning, citing financial fraud and theft from minors. Sarah called everyone in the family begging for lawyer money, but nobody had any to spare suddenly. 10 weeks after that dinner, David's co-worker Marcus posted on Facebook about David's situation and started a legitimate GoFundMe that raised $5,000 in 2 days from people who actually knew what David had been through. My family reported it as fraud and tried to get it taken down, claiming David was lying about his situation and manipulating people for money. GoFundMe investigated and found no fraud, and the money went through to David's account. Liam, meanwhile, had gotten desperate after his release and tried to open credit cards using David's social security number that he'd memorized from all the times David had co-signed for him. But David had already frozen his credit and set up fraud alerts, so when Liam tried to open a Best Buy card, the system flagged it immediately, and David pressed charges for identity theft. The next week, I found out from Sarah's oldest kid that she'd been telling them Uncle David was sick in the head and dangerous to be around. Her 13-year-old called me confused because David had always been nice to him, and now his mom was saying David might hurt them if they saw him alone. The kid kept asking me what was wrong with Uncle David and why his mom was lying about him. I didn't know what to tell him. Around the same time, I went to Mom's house to grab some old photos and noticed David's bedroom door was open. Everything was exactly like when he left for college 15 years ago. Same posters on the walls, same bedspread, even his old textbooks on the shelf. Mom caught me looking and mentioned she'd been charging David $200 a month to keep it that way as storage. She called it his shrine to failure. 3 months after that family dinner, Mom fell in her kitchen and broke her hip bad. Sarah was at a spa weekend, Liam was in jail by then, and I was stuck at work. Nobody could afford the $300 medical transport. She ended up taking an Uber to the emergency room by herself. The driver had to help her into a wheelchair. The nurses called me asking why an injured elderly woman showed up alone. While all this was happening, someone posted David's story on Reddit and it went completely viral. Melissa's Instagram followers found it and started calling her out for being the cousin who went to Miami while David walked to work. The brands she worked with dropped her within days. She lost every sponsorship deal she had. Her whole influencer career just crashed overnight. Then Sarah got desperate and tried breaking into David's storage unit at 2 in the morning. The facility had cameras everywhere and caught her trying to cut the lock with bolt cutters. David got the footage emailed to him the next morning and added it to his growing restraining order file against her. That's when Derek reached out to me for the first time in years. He told me Sarah had been hiding money from him their whole marriage, taking cash David sent and putting it in her personal account while telling Derek they were broke. He showed me bank statements where she deposited David's money and bought herself jewelry the same week she told Derek they couldn't afford his medication. 14 weeks after that dinner, David asked me to help him pack up his apartment. He was moving and wanted someone there. He handed me this box full of every birthday card we never sent him, every thank you note we never wrote, every IOU we scribbled on napkins and forgot about. 20 years of broken promises in one cardboard box. He kept them all. Then Mom did something even crazier and tried to sue David for elderly abandonment. She actually went to a lawyer and everything. The lawyer literally laughed when she explained that David was only 35 and she'd been taking money from him since he was 18. He told her she'd be the one in legal trouble if she pursued it. The charges against Liam stuck hard. He was looking at 2 to 5 years for the identity theft. From jail, he wrote David this long letter, but it wasn't an apology. He spent 4 pages demanding David drop the charges because family doesn't do this to family. He said David owed him for all the times Liam had included him in things. 4 months after that dinner, the family somehow found out David had accepted a job in Seattle. Sarah organized this whole plan where they'd all show up at the airport to stop him from leaving. She made a group chat about it, discussing who would block which exit and who would talk to security to delay him. They were treating it like some kind of intervention. I saw the messages and warned David immediately. He changed his flight to Boston without telling anyone and was already boarding when Sarah posted a selfie from Hartford Airport with the caption, "Intervention time." The whole family stood there for 3 hours checking every exit while David landed in Seattle and started his new life. 2 days later, Sarah's oldest kid messaged David on Discord saying he understood why his uncle left and that his mom was crazy. David just sent back a thumbs up emoji and blocked him too because he wasn't taking any chances with family drama anymore. 4.5 months after that dinner, Mom had chest pains at the grocery store and ended up in the cardiac unit. She called David 17 times from her hospital bed, but he never picked up. She left this long voicemail blaming him for her heart problems and saying he was killing her with stress. The nurses could hear her screaming into the phone about ungrateful children while her monitors beeped faster. Meanwhile, I got my acceptance letter to grad school in Portland with a full scholarship I'd been working on for 2 years. When I told the family at Sunday dinner, they all assumed David was paying for it like always. Mom actually said she'd called David to thank him for helping me until I explained I'd gotten grants and scholarships on my own. Sarah rolled her eyes and said I was probably lying to protect David, which made no sense at all. That same week, Melissa's husband filed for divorce after finding out she'd hidden $40,000 in credit card debt. He told the court she'd been lying about money for years and taking cash from David while spending on designer bags. She had to move back in with her parents in their tiny apartment and sell her Mercedes. Sarah went on the local news claiming David abandoned his sick mother and troubled brother to live it up in Seattle. She wore her best dress and cried on camera about how David turned his back on family values. David's new boss called him into the office the next day asking about the news story. David showed him years of bank statements and text messages proving he'd given them over $200,000. His boss just shook his head and told David to get a restraining order immediately. 5 months after that dinner, David sent cease and desist letters to everyone through his lawyer. Mom went on Facebook Live tearing hers up and calling David an ungrateful monster who forgot where he came from. She got 300 comments from her church friends saying they'd pray for her wayward son. Liam's trial finally happened, and he took a plea deal for 18 months in prison and 3 years probation. At sentencing, he stood up and blamed David for forcing him into crime by cutting him off financially. The judge actually stopped him and said that wasn't how adult responsibility worked. I started seeing a therapist to deal with all the family crap, and she was shocked when I showed her my list. 15 years of David paying for everything while the family called him cheap and selfish behind his back. She said it was one of the worst cases of financial abuse she'd seen in 20 years of practice. Derek finally got full custody after Sarah couldn't pay her lawyer anymore and had to use a public defender. Sarah moved back in with Mom, and now they sit around the house all day complaining about David. 2 generations of broke people blaming someone else for their problems while their power gets shut off. 6 months after that dinner, I was scrolling through Reddit when I saw a post with 40,000 upvotes on the front page. The title made my stomach drop. I was my family's ATM for 15 years. When I asked for $500, they ghosted me. I clicked it, and there was our whole story. Every detail, every broken promise, every excuse we'd made. David had changed the names, but anyone who knew us would recognize it immediately. Within 3 hours, it had 100,000 upvotes and 5,000 comments. By that night, it was at 500,000 and climbing fast. Screenshots started showing up on Twitter and Facebook, and people were tagging news outlets in the comments. My phone started buzzing with texts from cousins asking if this was about us. The next morning, it hit 1 million upvotes, and Good Morning America called David's work looking for him. CNN wanted an interview, and some Netflix documentary producer left 3 voicemails on his phone. Extended family members I hadn't talked to in years started picking sides on Facebook. Aunt Carol wrote this long post about how she always knew we were users, and she'd warned David years ago. The way David kept all those birthday cards and IOUs in a box for 20 years makes me wonder what that felt like for him to look at every day. Uncle Pete said David was being petty and should have kept family business private. David's story connected with thousands of other people who'd been their family's bank account. account. Support groups for financial abuse started inviting him to speak at their meetings. He got invited to be on 3 different podcasts about toxic family dynamics. Meanwhile, Mom and Sarah were living on food stamps and whatever minimum wage job Sarah could find that week. The house David had helped them keep for 10 years was going into foreclosure. The bank sent notices every week, and Mom just threw them in a drawer. They ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches while posting old vacation photos on Facebook to keep up appearances. Mom sold her good jewelry at a pawn shop to keep the lights on 1 more month. Sarah's car got repossessed, and she had to take the bus to her job at Dollar General. They blamed David for everything while their situation got worse every single day. Then this documentary filmmaker called David about featuring his story in a series about family financial abuse. The producer said his post was the most powerful example she'd seen of how families exploit their most generous members. Mom found out about it and threatened to sue David if he appeared in any documentary. Sarah posted on Facebook that David was lying about everything and trying to get famous off family drama. Liam called David drunk one night screaming about lawyers and defamation and how he'd make David's life hell. 7 months after that dinner, I flew out to Seattle to visit David in his new apartment. He had actual furniture now, not just the air mattress and folding chair he'd lived with for years. His fridge had real food in it, fresh vegetables and meat and things that weren't just whatever was on sale. He looked younger somehow, like the stress had melted off his face. He showed me his bank account with actual savings in it for the first time in 15 years. We went out to dinner at a real restaurant and he didn't check the prices before ordering. He told me about his new job and his coworkers who actually appreciated him. That same week, Mom made this big dramatic Facebook post about writing David out of her will. She tagged him and everything, making sure everyone saw her taking a stand against toxic family members. The comments were brutal, people pointing out she had nothing to leave anyone anyway. Someone screenshotted her post from 2 weeks earlier begging for grocery money. Her own friends were calling her out for being broke while acting like she had an estate to distribute. Sarah's kids started working at the mall and fast food places after school. Derek made them put half of every paycheck into savings accounts they couldn't touch until they turned 18. They learned what $8 an hour actually meant when you had to work for it. Sarah's daughter told me she finally understood why Uncle David always looked so tired at family dinners. Her son started asking Derek questions about budgets and how credit cards worked. They were learning what David never got the chance to teach them because we never let him. I was going through old boxes in Mom's basement looking for Christmas decorations when I found our family videos. Hours of footage from birthdays and holidays and graduations. David always behind the camera. You could hear his voice sometimes asking people to smile or move closer together, but he was never in the frame, just documenting everyone else being happy. There was one video from Sarah's wedding where David had paid for the whole reception. You could hear him in the background telling the DJ to play another hour. He'd cover it. 8 months after that dinner, Melissa tried to start a GoFundMe claiming David had abandoned the family in poverty. She wrote this sob story about how he'd cut off his struggling mother and sister without warning. Within 2 hours, people had reported it as fraud and linked to David's viral Reddit post. The GoFundMe got taken down in less than 6 hours. Melissa tried again with a different story, but Reddit found that one too. She finally gave up after the third attempt got her banned from the platform completely. David got promoted to senior analyst at his Seattle company, and his boss pulled him aside after the announcement. She told him she'd seen his story online, and part of why she hired him was his integrity. Anyone who could walk away from that kind of manipulation and rebuild their life had the strength she wanted on her team. His new salary was double what he'd ever made before, and Mom completely lost it when she found out through LinkedIn. She took every pill in her medicine cabinet 3 weeks later, and the neighbor found her passed out on the bathroom floor. The hospital pumped her stomach and put her on a psych hold, but she'd listed David as her emergency contact from years ago. They called his number over and over, but it just went straight to voicemail since he'd blocked the hospital's area code along with ours. The psychiatrist kept her for 72 hours and diagnosed her with severe depression and adjustment disorder. 9 months after that dinner, I walked across the stage to get my master's degree and checked my mailbox the next day. There was a card from David with $50 inside and a note that just said, "Proud of you." It was the first money he'd given any family member since he left, and he only sent it to me. Sarah was working 3 jobs by then, just to pay Mom rent for living in the house David had saved. She posted these motivational quotes on Facebook about grinding and hustling, but never once mentioned how David had paid her rent for 5 years straight. She'd work breakfast shift at Denny's, then lunch at the mall food court, then overnight stocking at Target. Her kids basically raised themselves while she scraped together $2,000 a month for Mom. Then Liam called collect from prison saying some guy shanked him in the yard for stepping in during a fight. The blade went through his kidney and he needed emergency surgery, but the prison wouldn't cover all of it. Mom sent frantic messages to David begging him to help with the medical bills, but he never even opened them. Liam survived, but he'd be pissing blood for months and walking with a limp. 10 months after that dinner, David posted a photo on Instagram with a woman named Claire at Pike Place Market in Seattle. She was a software engineer who knew his whole story because he'd been completely honest from day one. She respected his boundaries and understood why he wouldn't introduce her to us. Mom found out about her through a fake account and sent Claire dozens of messages calling her a homewrecker who stole her son. Then the IRS letter came to Mom's door saying she was being audited for the last 7 years. Turns out all that cash David gave her over the years looked real suspicious when she claimed poverty on her taxes. She owed $12,000 in back taxes plus penalties and had 90 days to pay or face criminal charges. Derek got remarried around the same time to a teacher who made his kids actually do chores and save their allowance. Sarah went ballistic on social media calling the new wife a gold digger who was brainwashing the children. The woman blocked her after Sarah showed up drunk at their house screaming about custody rights she'd already lost. 11 months after that dinner, I sat down and wrote David a 5-page letter taking full responsibility for my silence. I told him I was a coward for not standing up for him and that I understood if he never forgave me. 2 weeks later, I got a text with just 2 words from a Seattle number saying, "Thank you." Mom couldn't make the tax payments and the bank started foreclosure proceedings on the house. I went to the auction and watched strangers bid on the home where we'd had 30 years of family dinners. Mom moved into a senior facility that smelled like pee, and Sarah started living in her car. She'd park at different Walmart lots each night and shower at the gym until they revoked her membership for non-payment. The local news picked up the story after someone leaked it online and ran a segment about financial abuse in families. They kept David anonymous but showed enough details that Mom recognized everything immediately. She called the station threatening to sue for defamation, but the lawyer they consulted just laughed at her. The whole thing went quiet for months after that. David kept building his business while the rest of us scrambled to figure out basic survival without our safety net. I watched Sarah move from couch to couch, posting less and less on social media until she just stopped altogether. Mom aged 10 years and 6 months, her hair going completely gray as she fought with Social Security over every penny. Melissa tried selling makeup online but quit after 2 weeks when she realized it meant actual work. Liam sat in county jail counting days until his early release date, writing letters nobody answered. Then exactly 1 year after that dinner, David posted something on Instagram for the first time since everything fell apart. Just a photo of him at a steakhouse cutting into a ribeye, glass of wine next to his plate. The caption read, "First time in 15 years." That simple post got 12,000 likes in 3 hours. People started tagging our family members in the comments, asking where their thank you posts were for all those years he'd helped them. Melissa panicked and tried to spin the whole thing by claiming she was also a victim of financial abuse. She went on TikTok crying about how David had created dependency in the family, how she never asked for his help, how this was all manipulation. The comments destroyed her. Someone posted screenshots of her Hawaii vacation photos from the week David couldn't afford his car repair. Another person found her old Facebook posts bragging about her cousin always having her back financially. How did Claire handle getting all those angry messages from David's mom calling her a homewrecker? It's really interesting that David told her everything right from the start, and she still wanted to be with him. That takes a special kind of understanding person. She deleted everything and went dark, but the damage was done. 3 weeks later, Liam got out on early release to a halfway house in New Haven. First thing he did was borrow someone's phone to message David on Facebook, asking for $200 for commissary items. He found out real quick that David had blocked him on everything. Every platform, every number, even email. Liam threw such a fit that they added another month to his halfway house stay for violent behavior. Meanwhile, Sarah's kids were actually doing better without all the chaos. Derek sent their report cards to David through a mutual friend. Straight A's for both kids, perfect attendance, teacher comments about how much calmer they seemed lately. David saved the photos but never responded, just watched from a distance as his nephews finally got the stability they needed. Then 13 months after that dinner, Mom had a massive stroke while arguing with her landlord about late rent. The left side of her body just stopped working. She needed round-the-clock care that none of us could afford or provide. The state had to step in and take over her medical decisions because we couldn't even agree on which nursing home to put her in. I started my PhD program in Portland that fall, packing everything I owned into 2 suitcases and driving across the country alone. A week after I moved in, a package arrived from David. Inside was a small succulent in a ceramic pot with a note that said, "These thrive on neglect." I kept it on my windowsill and thought about calling him every day, but never did. Things got worse when Sarah got caught shoplifting groceries from Stop and Shop. Security grabbed her trying to walk out with a cart full of unpaid food, her kids watching from the car. Her mugshot went viral when someone connected her to David's story from the news segment. The headlines wrote themselves about the woman who wouldn't help her brother now stealing food. She spent 3 nights in county lockup before Derek finally bailed her out. 14 months after that dinner, David's girlfriend posted an ultrasound photo on her private Instagram. David was going to be a dad. He commented just once, saying his kid would never wonder if their father had their back. We all saw it through mutual friends who screenshot everything. Mom tried making a fake Facebook profile from the nursing home to friend request David, using some random woman's photos and the name Jennifer Smith. She messaged him about needing help with medical bills, thinking she was clever. David recognized her writing style immediately, the way she used too many exclamation points and called everyone honey. He blocked that account too and reported it for impersonation. The worst part came when Liam violated his parole by trying to contact David, despite the restraining order David had filed. Liam had gotten desperate and showed up at David's office building, waiting in the parking garage. Security called the cops before he even made it to the elevator. That got him sent back to prison for his remaining sentence plus 6 more months for the violation. 15 months after that dinner, Sarah's eldest son Jake got a full scholarship to a private school in Hartford. The letter he sent David came through his lawyer's office since nobody had David's real address anymore. Jake wrote about watching his mom struggle and learning that you can't depend on others to save you. He thanked David for showing him what happens when you give everything away and get nothing back. Sarah never knew about the letter. By then, Mom's nursing home bills were hitting $8,000 every month, and the state started digging into her finances. That's when they found the separate account with $50,000 she'd been hiding while taking David's money for years. The state seized everything for Medicaid fraud. Mom called everyone crying about how unfair it was, but David had already changed his number. Around the same time, a psychology professor at Yale started using David's story as a case study about financial abuse in families. David consulted on the chapter through his lawyer, staying anonymous but providing all the receipts and text messages. The textbook sold to universities across the country. I saw David at an academic conference in Seattle 16 months after that dinner. We had coffee in the hotel lobby, and he showed me pictures of his baby daughter on his phone. When I asked for his address to send a birthday gift, he just smiled and changed the subject. His wedding ring caught the light, but he wouldn't say who he married or where they lived. 2 weeks later, Melissa published a Medium article calling David a narcissist who abandoned his sick mother. She wrote 3,000 words about family loyalty and painted herself as the victim trying to hold everyone together. David's lawyer sent a cease and desist within hours, along with copies of every Venmo request she'd ignored and every text where she'd promised help that never came. The article disappeared by morning. Sarah was living in a women's shelter by month 17, working at the dollar store on Maple Street. She posted on Facebook about rebuilding her life and finding her strength, but never once mentioned what David had done for her kids over the years. She still acted like he was the bad guy for walking away. Then Mom had her second stroke right before Thanksgiving. This time, half her body stopped working, and she couldn't talk anymore. The hospital listed David as next of kin from her old paperwork, but they couldn't find him anywhere. The family group chat exploded with plans to track him down since Mom might not make it. Suddenly, everyone found money for a private investigator when it was about forcing David to come back, not about helping him when his car broke down. The investigator was good and found David's Seattle address within a week. The family planned to show up at his house together, force him to listen, make him come see Mom before she died. Sarah bought a plane ticket with her last paycheck, and Liam got special permission from his parole officer to travel. They were all going to ambush him on a Tuesday morning. I sat in my apartment staring at my phone for hours, knowing what they planned. Finally, I texted David's lawyer with a warning about what was coming. Tuesday came, and the family showed up at David's beautiful house in Queen Anne, with its view of the water and the garden full of vegetables. But David wasn't there because I'd warned him. His neighbors called the cops when Sarah started screaming on his lawn about betrayal and family, and how I was a traitor for warning him. Someone filmed the whole thing, and it ended up on the Seattle subreddit. The house was empty except for a note on the door from David's lawyer with cease and desist orders for each of them. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived at my apartment with David's lawyer's name printed on the front. Inside was a formal no-contact order that included every family member's name, even mine, at the bottom. The lawyer had attached David's final message typed on legal paper, stating that any attempt at contact would result in immediate legal action. I folded the paper and put it in my desk drawer next to my thesis notes. 19 months passed before Mom died alone in the nursing home, where the state had placed her after losing the house. The nurses found her at 6 in the morning during their regular rounds. David never showed up to the funeral, even though Sarah had somehow gotten word to his lawyer. Only 12 people sat in those hard wooden chairs, while Sarah stood at the podium blaming David for everything. She kept wiping her eyes and saying Mom died of a broken heart because her son abandoned her. The funeral director kept checking his watch because we'd only paid for the basic package. 2 days later, we all got called to the lawyer's office for the will reading. Mom had changed her will 3 months before she died, leaving everything to David with a note about making amends. The lawyer explained that the estate was nothing but debt from medical bills and back taxes. David had already refused the inheritance through his attorney before we even got there. Sarah and Liam started fighting right there in the parking lot over Mom's jewelry box and photo albums. Sarah grabbed the box while Liam pulled at the albums until pages scattered across the asphalt. Someone called the cops when Liam shoved Sarah into a parked car. The local news showed up and filmed the whole thing for their evening broadcast. The reporter called us the family who lost everything after losing their ATM. 20 months after that dinner, I opened my laptop to find an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line said, "She'll never know any of you." And inside was a photo of a baby girl. She had David's eyes and looked healthy and loved, with tiny fingers wrapped around someone's thumb. I deleted the email but saved the photo to a folder I never opened. Sarah's kids started doing better once they moved in permanently with Derek. They got part-time jobs at the mall and started saving for college instead of asking for money. Derek made sure they understood what their mom had done wrong and why they needed to be different. I spent months writing my dissertation on financial abuse in families. On the dedication page, I wrote, "To DM, who gave everything and asked for nothing until it was too late." My advisor said it was too personal, but I kept it anyway. 2 years after that dinner, Liam got out of prison and took a job at a warehouse loading trucks. He lived in a halfway house with 3 other guys and learned what David always knew about surviving on your own money. He worked double shifts without complaining because he had no other choice. Sarah met someone at the shelter where she volunteered after losing her house. They got married at City Hall with just the kids as witnesses. She worked 2 jobs now, cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves in the morning. I'm trying to figure out why Mom thought she could trick David with that fake profile when she wrote exactly like herself with all those exclamation points. Did she really think changing her name to Jennifer Smith would fool someone who knew her for decades? She never complained about being tired because she finally understood what real struggle meant. At my PhD graduation ceremony, I walked across that stage to get my diploma. I paid for everything myself through teaching and research grants. As I shook the dean's hand, I saw someone in the back row who looked like David. When I looked again after getting my diploma, the seat was empty. Maybe he was there watching from far away, or maybe I just wanted him to be. The family ATM was permanently closed. Thanks for exploring all these questions with me today. I had a blast wondering about everything right alongside you. Hope to share more curiosity with you next time, and like the video, it helps more than you think.